They wheeled her out like a broken cart left in the sun. Just past the last fence post of town, where dust lingered longer and laughter never came, Rosemary sat alone. Her hands were tied with coarse rope, not because she was dangerous, but because it was easier that way. Easier to pretend she hadn't once been the pride of her family, the fastest girl on a horse, the one who sang in church like her lungs knew heaven. Now she couldn't walk, and somehow that made her unworthy of everything else. People didn't visit. They glanced and passed, said she was cursed, said the fall from that horse knocked something loose in her soul, not just her legs. Said a woman who couldn't stand was a woman no man would ever kneel for, except him. He didn't speak when he arrived, just walked up slow, took off his hat, and knelt like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time in weeks, Rosemary looked someone in the eyes. He didn't ask what happened, and she didn't have to explain, because in that silence something shifted, and for the first time in weeks, she felt seen. She didn't speak the next day either, nor the one after that. The man with the sun-worn hat came back at dawn, each time the sky still pale and yawning. He didn't bring food. He didn't bring flowers. He brought himself, and that was more than anyone else had. Some days he sat on the ground. Some days on the overturned crate that used to hold nails. Once he stood the whole morning with arms crossed, squinting toward the distance, saying nothing. And she let him. Rosemary had learned that words were a luxury people used when they felt safe. She didn't feel safe. Not in this body, not in this place. The rope was gone now, cut silently on the third morning with his old penknife. He didn't make a show of it, just worked at the knot while she looked away. When it came loose, he tucked the knife back in his boot and stepped back like he hadn't done a thing worth noticing. Still, she noticed. The wheelchair creaked when she shifted. Her legs hadn't moved much, not since the fall. There was still some feeling, pins and needles like insects crawling just under the skin, but not enough to trust her own weight. They said she was lucky to be alive. She wasn't sure. The chair had become a coffin on wheels, but he kept showing up. One morning, a breeze caught the hem of her dress and lifted it just enough for her to see the mud stains were finally drying. She looked up and found him watching. Not the stains, not her legs, but her face. She frowned. He nodded once like he understood. His name was Jonas. She heard it accidentally, a week in, when someone passed by and spat near his boots. "Careful, Dwyer. Don't want to catch her curse." He didn't flinch, just brushed his hand over his hat brim and stayed seated. Dwyer. She mouthed it when he wasn't looking. It sounded like stone, like something the river couldn't move. One afternoon, clouds bruised the sky, and the scent of iron hung heavy in the air. Jonas arrived with a blanket and draped it gently across her knees. Still no words. But when the first drop fell, he pulled his crate closer under the flap of her tent and sat beside her, shoulders barely brushing. Thunder rolled, horses snorted in the distance, but neither moved. She turned her head. "You're not from here." It wasn't a question. He didn't answer anyway. "Neither am I," she added, her voice dry from disuse. He turned his head slightly, and for the first time, she saw the scar across his cheek. Thin, like a cracked eggshell, curving from jaw to ear. She didn't ask. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy, yes, but like soil over a seed. Something was growing in it, slowly, painfully, but surely. By the second week, she started telling him things. Not all at once, but in pieces. Her name, her horse's name, the exact moment she fell, how she could still hear the snap of the branch, the crush of her ribs, how her brother hadn't even come to the clinic, how her father said, "You were supposed to marry, not shatter." Jonas didn't interrupt, didn't console. He just sat through every sentence like it mattered. One morning she cried, no noise, just tears crawling out on their own, stubborn as weeds. He passed her a cloth without looking. That night she dreamed she was standing again. Not walking, not running, just standing, barefoot in a field, wind tugging her hair. She woke up with her fingers clutching the armrest like it was her anchor. And then he arrived again, every morning like sunrise. 3 weeks in, he spoke. "You want coffee?" She blinked. "What?" He motioned to the pot over the small fire he'd built behind the tent. The tin mug in his hand steamed faintly. He poured a second and set it on the crate between them. Then silence again. But it was warmer now. The coffee was bitter, burnt, but it tasted like something real, something made. "You built this fire?" she asked, sipping slowly. He nodded. "I thought you were just sitting." He gave a half smile. "Been doing both a long time." And that was all. Later that week, she asked, "Why do you come back?" He didn't answer right away, just looked out at the field stretching west, where the wheat bent like old men in the wind. "Don't know," he said finally. "Guess I got tired of being the only ghost in town." She stared at him. "You think I'm a ghost?" "No." He looked at her now fully. "I think you're trying not to disappear." She didn't have an answer to that, and she didn't need one, because that night, after he left, she wheeled herself 3 feet forward for the first time, and it felt like flight. The morning wind was softer than usual. It carried the scent of hay and old iron, things Jonas brought with him. He came with tools this time, not for her, not for the chair, but for the tent's broken hinge. He worked quietly, whistling under his breath, not a melody, but a pattern, rhythmic, predictable, like someone marking time in a world that forgot to count. Rosemary watched him from her chair, fingers curled around the blanket folded in her lap. She didn't interrupt. The sound was comforting, like footsteps on a wooden porch, or the way flour hit a mixing bowl, small things that meant life was still happening around her. "You fix things?" she asked when he stopped for a sip of water. He shrugged. "Only the ones that don't fight back." She smiled. Not wide, not warm, but real. By noon, the sun grew pushy, shoving light into the corners of her eyes. Jonas set up a second cloth above her chair, a makeshift shade. She didn't ask him to. He didn't ask if she wanted it. There was something sacred in that, being helped without being handled. Her arms still worked fine, strong from the effort of moving the wheels back and forth, even if just in short circles near the tent. She'd started doing that now, a few feet forward, a few back, turning, reversing, remembering. "I used to dance," she said suddenly, later that afternoon. Jonas glanced over, but said nothing. Not well, not proper, just when no one was looking. The wind stirred her hair. She tilted her head back to feel it on her neck. There was this song, fiddle and banjo, played every third Saturday by the general store. I'd go with my sisters. They'd wait to be asked. I didn't wait. He smiled. That sounds right. She narrowed her eyes. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing bad, he said, holding up a hand. Just, you don't seem like someone who waits for permission. I used to be. Her voice was quieter now. Until the fall. Then I started waiting on everything. Waiting for someone to help me up. Waiting for my legs to remember. Waiting for my family to come back. Jonas looked at her long and slow, then turned his eyes to the dirt. Some folks don't come back, even if they're standing right next to you. It hung there between them like a bell that had just been struck. That evening, after he left, Rosemary wheeled herself again, past the edge of the tent this time, just far enough to touch the fence with her fingertips. The wood was warm, familiar, grounding. She thought about what he said. People didn't come back, but some showed up, and that mattered more. The next morning she was waiting, hair tied back, dressed cleaner than it had been in weeks, hands resting calmly on the armrests like she'd always meant to be seen this way. Jonas nodded once when he arrived. Acknowledgement, not praise. He brought a small stool this time, for her feet. You gonna fix those too? She asked, nodding down. He raised an eyebrow. Don't seem broken. She blinked, not at the joke, but the meaning. They sat for a while in easy quiet. Birds chirped beyond the canvas walls. A horse snorted lazily nearby. Someone's hammer clanged from a wagon repair shop not far off. I dreamed again last night, she said. Standing? She shook her head. Running. Through water. He didn't reply. But this time I wasn't scared. I wasn't trying to get away from anything. I just liked the splash. Jonas stirred the fire, poking at a coal that refused to catch. My brother used to race me down to the creek, he said slowly. I always let him win. He never knew. Rosemary smiled. That's cruel. It made him brave, Jonas replied. Sometimes lying makes people stronger. She tilted her head. Is that what you do? Lie to make people stronger? He met her eyes. Only when they deserve better than what's true. The words sunk in like rain after a dry spell. Later that week, Rosemary asked for a favor. Help me out of this thing. Jonas froze. You sure? She nodded. I want to feel the ground. He said nothing more. Just moved slow, careful as prayer. He crouched beside her, one hand behind her back, the other steadying her knees. Together they shifted. She slid down, dress catching on the footrest, hands gripping his forearm tighter than she meant to. Her knees hit the earth, not hard but honest. She exhaled. Jonas stepped back, giving her space. Her fingers reached down, curling into the dirt. The texture, the grit, the weight, it all returned to her in waves. She closed her eyes. People think broken means done, she whispered. Jonas knelt beside her, not touching, just there. But some things need to crack before they grow. He nodded. Like seeds. Exactly. They stayed like that until her legs trembled too hard to hold her. Then he lifted her back, slow, steady, silent. And this time, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt carried. By the end of that week, she wheeled herself to the water trough and back. Twice. No help. She didn't make a sound when she did it. Not a triumphant yell, not even a gasp. But when Jonas arrived that evening and saw the trail in the dirt, the wide arc of wheels, the double pass, he didn't ask a thing. He just nodded. And when he left that night, she smiled. The next morning, the world shifted. Jonas didn't show up at his usual hour. Rosemary waited, first in her chair, then at the edge of the tent. By noon, she was staring down the road, eyes narrowed against the glare. No footsteps, no firewood bundle, no shadow slipping between buildings like it belonged nowhere and everywhere. He didn't come. By sunset, her heart was thudding louder than her wheels. She told herself not to care. He was just a man, just a visitor. People left. They always did. But still, she sat in silence longer than usual that night. The wind was colder, her fingers trembled, and she hated how empty the air felt without him in it. He returned 2 days later, left arm in a sling, shirt torn, dust clinging to his face like shame. She didn't ask what happened. She wanted to, but something about his gait, slow, stiff, uneven, told her the answer wouldn't come easy. He sat like he'd never left, laid the old crate down beside her, slower than usual, and exhaled like the whole sky had been sitting on his chest. I thought you weren't coming back, she said quietly. He looked at her, not with guilt, with grief. Didn't plan on leaving. She nodded, waiting. But he didn't explain. Instead, he pulled a small object from his coat pocket, a tin bird. Crude, misshapen, barely an inch long. It looked like it had been hammered out of scrap and sorrow. He held it out. For your windowsill, he said. I don't have a window. He nodded. Then call it hope. She took it gently, turned it over in her palm. The edges were rough, the wings uneven, but it looked like it was still trying to fly. She set it on the crate between them. I like it broken, she said. Me too. And for the first time, they both laughed. Not long, not loud, but enough. As summer wore on, they fell into rhythm. Not lovers, not quite friends, but something softer, stronger, like the way cottonwood trees hold shape in a storm, not resisting, not bending too far, just staying. Jonas didn't press her to talk. Rosemary didn't beg him to share. But little by little, pieces of their stories fell into the spaces between them. He used to ride with the railroad crews, surveying, marking, clearing. One day he didn't come home. No letters, no trail. When he did return, his wife had remarried. Thought he'd died in the floods. He never corrected her. Was it easier that way? Rosemary asked one night. Jonas threw another twig into the fire. For her, maybe. And for you? He looked at her. I got used to silence. She didn't fill it, just reached for the tin bird and held it a little closer. Then came the letter, from her sister, folded crooked, ink smudged. Papa says you can come back now. Says you've punished yourself enough. Rosemary read it twice, then a third time, slower. She didn't cry. She didn't rip it. She just set it down and whispered, I wasn't punishing myself. They were. Jonas watched her carefully. You gonna go? She shook her head. You don't go back to places that made you disappear. He didn't argue. Instead, he stood, walked to the back of his wagon and returned with a wooden box, set it at her feet. I found something, he said. She opened the lid. Inside, pieces of a chair, wheels, bolts, wood, leather, polished, repaired. It's yours, he said, but stronger now, lighter. She stared at it. I don't need fixing, she said. He didn't flinch. I know, but your chair did. She looked up at him, really looked, and in that moment she saw it. Not pity, not penance, but partnership. That night she wheeled herself beyond the edge of the tent, all the way to the bench in front of the general store. People stared. She stared back, and Jonas sat beside her. Not behind, not pushing, beside. They didn't speak, didn't need to, because the town could whisper all it wanted. She had her own name again, and someone who stayed. They said she didn't belong there. Not in front of the store, not on that bench, not in that chair, and certainly not beside a man like Jonas Dwyer. Whispers followed her now, not the kind that slithered quietly into shadows, but the ones that clung, loud enough to hear, soft enough to deny. She's still here? Thought her people took her back. Didn't he lose a wife? Now he's collecting broken things? Jonas never responded, but Rosemary heard every word. She pretended not to. Every morning he helped her from the wagon. Every evening she wheeled herself back without asking. He didn't offer. She didn't expect. That unspoken respect sat stronger between them than the stairs. But still, it wore her down, like wind against old stone. One morning she didn't come out. Jonas waited, leaning against the wagon wheel, thumbs hooked through his belt. After a while he knocked once on the sideboard. No answer. Again softer. Still nothing. He was about to leave when he heard it. I'm tired. Her voice muffled, small. I'm tired of being the story no one wants to finish. He pressed his forehead against the wood. Let the silence settle. You're not a story, he said. You're the damn ending. Later that week, she rolled into the saloon. Every conversation halted. A glass dropped. One man muttered, this place ain't for her. Another whispered, she'll scare off the music. But she didn't turn back. She wheeled herself to the bar, lifted her chin, and asked for a coffee. The barkeep hesitated, then poured it. Her hands didn't shake. And when she turned around, Jonas was there, hat in hand, proud as thunder. She didn't smile. Didn't need to. The way he looked at her said everything. That night, she placed the tin bird on the saloon's front step. Let the wind carry it wherever it wanted, because she didn't need it anymore. She wasn't hoping, she was living. The next day, the chair broke. Not completely, but the left wheel jammed against a rock, and the whole frame pitched forward. Rosemary tumbled hard, palms scraped, knee bruised. She didn't scream, but the breath knocked from her chest. Jonas was there in seconds. She pushed him away. I can do it. He crouched beside her, not touching, just present. She tried twice. Failed twice. The third time, she got one knee under. By the fifth, she was sitting upright again. He offered her water. She didn't take it. Instead, she said, it still counts if you fall. He nodded. Sometimes it counts more. They sat there in the dirt, sweat on their brows, dust in their lungs. And then she laughed. A real laugh. Sharp, loud, free. He laughed too. And for the first time, the whole town turned to look. But this time, it wasn't out of pity. It was out of something that looked like awe. That evening, Jonas brought her a gift, wrapped in canvas, tied with twine. Inside, a pair of boots, small, soft-soled, light as feathers. I thought, maybe not for walking, he said, stumbling over the words, but for feeling. Earth, wood floors, rain. She stared at them, then slipped them on. Her feet twitched. Not a miracle, but a spark. I used to dance barefoot, she whispered. I know, he said. She looked at him. How? I listened. Her eyes filled, but didn't spill. Instead, she held out her hand. He took it. No kiss, no confession. Just the quiet clasp of something beginning. Something brave. Days passed. The town didn't change overnight. Some still stared. Some still whispered. But others nodded. Others waved. Others asked if she needed something. Not out of charity, but out of choice. She said no most times. She was learning to ask only when it mattered. And Jonas, he was always there. Not leading, not following, just with her. One evening while they sat beside the creek outside town, she said, You don't talk much about her. Jonas didn't pretend to misunderstand. My wife? She nodded. He picked at a blade of grass. She loved the sky, said it never judged her. Always looked the same, no matter what kind of mess she was. Rosemary said nothing. She was kind, bright, but she needed someone who could fix everything. He looked up at her. I'm not that man anymore. Rosemary reached out, touched his wrist. Good. He blinked. Because I don't need fixing either. That night when he walked her back to the wagon, she leaned slightly toward him, shoulder to shoulder, not for balance, not for help, just because it felt right. And for the first time, he didn't step aside. The letter came folded neat, tied with blue string. Jonas found it tucked between 2 sacks of flour on his wagon bench just before sunrise. No name, just the handwriting, small, tight, unmistakably Rosemary's. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he carried it in his coat pocket all morning, like it might warm through the fabric. Like maybe it wasn't meant to be read so much as carried. When he finally sat down beside her that evening, she didn't ask if he'd read it. He just nodded once, and she exhaled, like she'd been holding the air in her chest for days. Didn't want to say it out loud, she said. You did. She turned to look at him. You okay with that? I'm not scared of hard truths, he said, just ones that stay buried. The letter had been simple, not poetic, not fragile, just real. They said I was cursed. You never flinched. They said I'd be a burden. You brought me coffee and silence. They said I'd be alone. But you keep showing up. So I think maybe they don't know everything. It wasn't a love letter, but it was love. And Jonas knew the difference. That week she tried something new. Walking, sort of, with a cane. He didn't suggest it, didn't buy it. She found it herself, an old thing rusting behind the blacksmith shed. Smoothed the handle, polished the tip, took one trembling step, then another. Jonas didn't hover. He watched from the porch, mug in hand, heart in his throat. She fell on the second try. He didn't move. She cursed, loud, ugly. Then she laughed. Then she stood. Why do you stay? She asked him one afternoon while mending the hem of her dress. He didn't look up. Because I don't believe in lost causes. She raised an eyebrow. And what am I? A cause worth choosing, he said. That shut her up, but not in a bad way, in the kind of way that makes silence holy. Later that week, Jonas took her to the North Field. No one lived there anymore. Just an old barn with half a roof, a tree that still bloomed despite the wind, and a plot of land where the wild grass bowed easy. This was my father's, he said. She ran her hand along the fence. You ever think of fixing it up? I do now. She turned to him slowly. Jonas. He held her gaze. Not asking you for anything, just showing you something. She felt it then, the space he was offering her. Not as a favor, not as rescue, but as choice. And choice was a language she hadn't spoken in years. That night, she wheeled herself to his wagon instead of waiting by hers. She didn't knock, just sat. When he stepped out, surprised, she said, I've been on my own for so long I forgot what being chosen feels like. He didn't interrupt. So if you mean it, about the field, about the house, about this, she waved vaguely between them, then I need you to understand something. He waited. I'm not easy. I'll fall again. I'll get angry. I'll hate this chair some days. I'll miss dancing. I'll need time. He knelt beside her, not to lower himself, not to comfort, but to meet her. And then, for the first time, he said it. I don't want easy. The next morning, the saloon keeper brought them bread. Said nothing, just nodded. That afternoon, a young boy offered to help push her cart at the general store. She declined kindly, but the gesture stayed with her. By sundown, a woman named June, whose husband had once made fun of Rosemary behind a whiskey glass, approached with a basket of tomatoes. They're bruised, she said, sheepish, but still good. Rosemary took them, bruised but still good, like all the best things. That night, as stars spilled careless across the sky, Jonas laid down 2 hammers and a blueprint on the crate between them. I was thinking, he said. Dangerous, she teased. He smiled. The porch will face west, so you can see the light go even when your legs get tired. She looked at him, really looked, and in her eyes he saw something new. Not hope, not dependence, but home. The chair still creaked. The cane still slipped. But the girl in the chair, she didn't. Not anymore. The first hammer swing came at dawn. Jonas didn't announce it. Didn't wait for a crowd. Just rolled up his sleeves, planted his boots in the earth, and drove the nail home. One strike, then another. Rosemary watched from the crate under the cottonwood, her hands wrapped around a warm mug, steam curling into her cheeks like memory. You're early, she said. You're awake. She smiled. Guess that makes us even. The house wasn't much yet, just wood frames and outlines scratched in dirt. But to Rosemary it looked like intention, and nothing had been built for her in a long, long time. She offered to help. Jonas hesitated. Don't you dare say no, she warned, eyebrows raised. So he nodded once. Slow. Start with sorting the nails. She did, then counted the hinges, then lined up boards by size, pointing out a cracked one he hadn't noticed. You've got an eye, he said. I've got time, she replied. By noon, sweat beaded his neck. Her sleeves were rolled high. Dirt lined her palms like she was born into it. And maybe she had been. Just didn't know it till now. They didn't talk much. Didn't need to. The rhythm of it, the lift, the place, the pound, was its own kind of conversation. At one point, Jonas looked up and found her staring at the half-framed doorway. What? He asked. She shrugged. Just picturing the porch swing. He nodded. Facing west. Always, she said. The clouds rolled in that evening. Fast, low, gray with warning. Jonas stopped mid-strike, turned his face to the wind. Storm's early, he muttered. How bad? He didn't answer. Instead, he began covering the lumber with canvas, pulling old ropes tight. She tried to help. He didn't stop her this time. Their hands met over the same corner, hers shaking, his steady. Back to the wagon, he said. Now. By the time they reached it, the wind howled like a wounded dog. Dust swirled. Branches snapped. Jonas lifted her gently into the back, laid a wool blanket over her lap, and tied down the shutters. She didn't protest, didn't flinch. Just asked, Have you seen one like this before? Once, he said. She waited. He didn't elaborate, so she reached for his wrist, found it taut, pulse steady. I trust you, she whispered. It was the first time she'd said it, and it landed deeper than rain. The storm hit hard. The roof creaked. Thunder cracked close like it had teeth, but they stayed dry, warm, and together. Jonas lit a lantern, set it on the crate between them. His hands trembled only once, when he brushed a strand of wet hair from her cheek and didn't pull away fast enough. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Instead, she pulled something from her pocket, the tin bird. It had made it through the storm. He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment it was like the storm was outside time, and they were inside something untouched. By morning the storm had passed. The frame still stood, the tree still bloomed, the earth was soaked but not broken. Jonas stepped out first, checked the foundation, whispered something to the boards like a man blessing the stubborn. When Rosemary wheeled up beside him, he turned to her and said, Looks like it held. She smiled. So did we. That afternoon, he moved a second chair into the wagon, not because she asked, not because she needed, but because sitting together had always been better than sitting alone. That night, they shared bread and stories. He told her about the time he got kicked by a mule and swore off stubborn animals. until he met her. She laughed so hard her stomach hurt. Then she told him about the first boy who kissed her, who ran crying when her father found out. Jonas chuckled. Brave soul. Not really, she said. You'd have stayed. He nodded. I did. When they lay down, backs to opposite walls, lantern still glowing faint, she whispered, You didn't ask me. Ask what? If I want to stay. With you, for real. He didn't answer right away. Then, I figured you already did. Silence. Then, you figured right. The rain returned gently that night, but it didn't scare them, because some storms bring ruin, and others bring roots. They moved in before the roof was done. No ceremony, no ribbon, just 2 chairs and one shared silence. The walls still breathed sawdust. The floorboards creaked like they were learning how to hold memory. But the sun came in through the half-hung window, and that was enough. For now. Rosemary wheeled to the middle of the room and stopped. This is ours, she said. Jonas leaned his hammer against the frame. Was always gonna be. She turned in a slow circle. There's no table yet, no stove. The bedroom's just dirt and moonlight. He walked to her, hands dusty, boots scuffed. But there's light, he said, and a place to rest. She looked up at him, eyes shining, and someone to rest beside. The porch was her favorite part. They built it last, together. He held the planks while she nailed. She painted the railing. He carved a tiny bird into one post when she wasn't looking, slanted, misshapen, but unmistakably trying to fly. When she found it, she didn't say a word. She just pressed her hand over it like a promise. Word spread fast. That the broken girl had a house now. That she didn't live out there anymore. That the man with no words and the woman with no walk had built something no one else could. People came, quietly. June brought curtains. The young boy from the store dropped off a pie, burnt at the edges but sweet in the middle. Even her father showed up. He stood at the fence for nearly half an hour, didn't step past it, didn't call her name, just looked at the house, at her, at Jonas, who stood without flinching. Then he tipped his hat and left. She didn't cry, didn't ache. She just whispered, I don't need their doors anymore. I've got my own. Fall came early that year. The leaves turned fast, then let go, like they'd finally stopped holding on for the wrong reasons. Rosemary started walking 10 steps a day, with the cane, then without it. Sometimes she stumbled, sometimes she didn't. But every time she looked up, he was there, not offering his hand, just waiting, like he always had, like he always would. One night they danced. It wasn't planned, no music, no audience, just a breeze through the window and the smell of stew cooling too fast. He held out his hand. She raised her eyebrows. You know I can't. Doesn't matter. So she stood, leaned slightly, balanced softly, and stepped into him. One step, another. Her cheek found his shoulder. His hand found her back. And the world didn't spin. It settled. They swayed in the middle of the unfinished kitchen. And for once, she didn't remember how she used to dance. She remembered how it felt to be chosen, again and again, with both feet on the floor and none of them needing to run. That winter, they built a fire that never went out, took turns feeding it, telling stories, not of what they'd lost, but what they'd kept. She wrote letters now, not to her family, to herself. Jonas carved, small things, handles, buttons, tokens. Every piece found a place in the house. She taught herself to bake again, burned the first 3 loaves. He ate them anyway. They fought sometimes. He forgot to cover the roof seam. She spilled oil on his maps, but the fights never grew taller than the walls, and love never needed to knock. It already lived there. The day the porch swing was finally hung, they watched the sun dip behind the fields together. No words, just her hand on his thumb brushing the back of hers. A shared breath in a home they'd built one nail, one kindness, one morning at a time. And when he finally said it, I love you. She didn't freeze, didn't deflect. She smiled like she'd known it all along. I know, she whispered. Me too. And then they sat back, Let the sky turn gold. Let the crickets sing. Let the world pass by a little slower, because they'd learn something the hard way. Some storms break you, some storms bury you, but the right storm, it shows you where to build and who to build with. They didn't ride off into the sunset. There were no grand weddings, no fireworks, just a porch that faced west and two people who kept showing up. Maybe love isn't about fixing the broken. Maybe it's about seeing the cracks and choosing to stay anyway. Because Jonas didn't save her, and Rosemary, she didn't need to be saved. She just needed someone to believe the broken chair wasn't the end of her story, that a heart can still dance even when the legs don't. And maybe that's what love really means. Choosing to build a home, not for who someone was, but for who they're still becoming. What about you? Did this story remind you of someone you once stood beside, even when the world turned away? Or maybe someone who waited for you to take that first shaky step? Tell us in the comments. Who did you think about while watching? And if you had to build a house that faced somewhere, where would you point the porch? We'll be reading every word, and maybe, just maybe, so will Jonas and Rosemary. The grave was already halfway dug when John Mercer looked up, breath curling in the frigid morning air, and spotted the wagon cresting the ridge. It moved slow, deliberate, a freight rig with frostbitten wheels and a sway-backed horse that looked one winter away from collapsing. The driver didn't wave, just hunched deeper into his coat and let the wind push silence between them. John straightened, shovel in hand, back aching from both cold and memory. They always sent him when no one wanted questions, when the job called for dirt over dignity. The wagon stopped a few feet from the hole. Canvas flapped. The man pulled it back, revealing a woman wrapped tight in a burial shroud. Pale hands folded, hair ink dark against linen, no shoes, no name. "She passed in the night," the man said flatly. "Kin don't want no fuss. Bury her before sunup." John didn't speak, just took the coin pouch. It was too heavy for someone with no family. He glanced at the body, and then he saw it, a flicker of breath, shallow as snowfall, a twitch in the fingers, lips trembling with something unfinished. John staggered back. She was alive. John Mercer had buried folks in all seasons. Men struck down by fever, women worn out by childbirth, cowboys shot over cards, and even a preacher who'd simply dropped dead on his sermon. He thought he'd seen every kind of end a person could meet, but not this. Not a girl with ice on her lashes and breath still warming her lips. He knelt beside the stretcher, eyes narrowing. Her skin was ghost pale, her neck bruised faintly beneath the linen, the edge of dried blood crusted just behind her ear. Too fresh, too violent. This wasn't sickness. This was silence done on purpose. The man who dropped her off was long gone. No name, no questions, just coin. John's fingers gripped the edge of the burial cloth. One part of him, tired, bitter, trained by too many hard winters, wanted to walk away, bury her, pretend he hadn't seen the twitch. He could get back to his cabin, stoke the fire, and never speak of this again. But something inside his chest clenched sharp. He cursed under his breath, then scooped her up in both arms. She was lighter than he expected, cold, damp, breathing shallow like a bird caught in a storm. The walk back to Ironwood Ranch was slow. Snow fell in thick, drifting sheets. His boots sank deep, and the wind cut like a blade. But the girl in his arms clung to life with every faint breath, and that was enough. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low. John kicked the door open with his heel and laid her on the cot beside the hearth. He stoked the flames, added every log he had, and wrapped her in every quilt he owned. Then he sat, just watched, as if to make sure she didn't vanish. Liam found them like that. The boy crept in through the back door, snow dusting his shoulders, eyes wide. "You bring home a ghost?" he asked. John didn't blink. "Close enough." "She dead?" "No." Liam stepped closer, frowning at the girl's bruises. He didn't ask anything more, just fetched another blanket from the trunk and draped it across her. The kettle hissed. John poured warm water into a tin cup and touched it to her lips. She didn't drink, not really, but her mouth parted just enough. A few drops passed. Her throat moved. "She's trying," Liam said softly. "That counts." John nodded. The boy had more sense than most grown men. By nightfall, the girl stirred. Her hand twitched. Her fingers curled against the blanket. She opened her eyes once, startled, confused, pale gray like winter sky, then passed out again. John sat up straight, rubbing his jaw. She wasn't gone. Not yet. The next morning she woke with a jolt. John caught her by the shoulders as she tried to rise, limbs flailing. "Easy," he said. "You're safe." Her breath came fast. Her eyes scanned the room like a cornered animal. Then something in his tone must have reached her, because she stopped fighting, just trembled. John handed her a piece of chalk, motioning to the wall near the hearth. "Got a name?" She hesitated. Then with effort, she leaned forward and scrawled one word on the wall in a shaky hand. "Mira." John studied it. "Mira," he repeated. She nodded once, then wiped the name away. Didn't want it remembered, or didn't want to be found. Over the next 2 days, she barely spoke, only whispered in sleep, curling into herself like someone expecting a blow. John watched her with wary eyes, feeding her broth, cleaning her wounds, keeping the fire going through the endless snow. Liam stayed close, sat at the foot of the bed, peeling apples with his pocket knife, talking nonsense to fill the quiet. He told her stories about a rabbit that stole bread from the mercantile, about how Sheriff Griggs once fell off his horse while drunk. Once when Liam made a joke about naming the cabin the Ghost House, John thought he saw Mira smile. Just barely. The third day she stood for the first time. John caught her before she collapsed. "You're not strong enough to fight yet," he said. "I already did," she rasped. "That's why I'm here." Her voice cracked like branches under frost. That night, John sat by the fire, polishing his revolver with an old rag. He hadn't fired it in months. He hoped he wouldn't need to, but he felt it. Something was coming, the kind of trouble that never traveled alone. He looked over at the girl, no, the woman, sleeping fitfully beneath the blankets. Then at Liam, curled on the floor with the dog. John reached for the shovel leaning by the door, not to bury, to defend. The storm let up on the fourth morning. Outside, the world lay buried in soft white mounds, fences half swallowed, barn doors crusted in frost. But inside the cabin, warmth had taken hold. The fire crackled low, and for the first time since Mira Calloway had been brought back from the brink, she stood on her own. Barefoot, swaying a little, she walked to the hearth and picked up a bit of chalk John kept for marking feed barrels. She stared at the blank wall beside the fire for a long moment, then began to write. Mira. The name appeared in shaky, deliberate script. Then she drew a line beneath it, then another. John stepped beside her, arms crossed. "That who you are?" he asked. She nodded. "Old name or new?" Her jaw worked, uncertain. Then quietly, "It's who I was." John studied the writing. "I've buried too many women who never got to say their name out loud. Feels wrong to waste the chance." She didn't reply, just stared at the chalk, then reached up and smudged it with the back of her hand. The name faded, like it had never been written at all. Later that day, Mira found John's old ledger. He didn't hide it, left it open on the table like always. It was just a book of graves, each name recorded in small, neat print. What he was paid, where they were buried. No flowers, no sermons. Just fact. Mira flipped the pages slowly, touching each name like it might rise from the paper. Then she paused. Her name, listed among the rest. John Mercer, burial, no kin, outskirts of Rustwater Creek, paid in full. She stared at it. He stood in the doorway watching her. "I didn't know you were breathing," he said. "Not until you twitched." "I know," she replied. Then with a pencil, she drew one line through her name. Neat, straight, final. John exhaled. "You don't have to be her anymore." Mira looked up. "I don't know who else to be." "Someone who wasn't bought," he said. Her hands trembled. Then she whispered, "They called me a deed." John's jaw tightened. "Who?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the window. The glass fogged from her breath. She traced a crooked symbol in the condensation. A slash, a bend, a brand. John's blood ran cold. He knew that mark. It belonged to the Briggs family. Harlan Briggs had carved it into cattle and fence posts in men's memories. He owned more land than the church and less soul than the saloon drunkard. A man who'd built his empire off fire, theft, and intimidation. You married into that? John asked quietly. She nodded. To Simon. He was sick, dying, had no heirs. Harlan made a deal with my uncle. I was the deal. And when Simon passed, they tried to erase me. Her voice caught. Said I was grieving, said I took sick, said I died. All quiet. No notice. No preacher. Just a wagon. A coin purse. And you. John sat hard on the edge of the chair. His throat burned. You remember who brought you to me? She closed her eyes. Tall, scar on his cheek, brown coat, called me the asset. John muttered a curse. He'd seen that man before. Once in the back room of Sheriff Griggs's office, whispering about water rights. What did they want? He asked. Mira turned from the window. There's water under that land, she said. Enough for cattle, even in drought. Simon deeded it to me before he died. But no one knew. Not until Harlan found the papers. Then, he made me disappear. John had heard the whispers before. Harlan's brother had vanished after a similar dispute. No body, no marker. Just silence and land changing hands. John stared. Not just a land grab. This was murder wrapped in silence. That night, Mira barely slept. She paced the cabin, her bare feet soundless on the floorboards. She peered through windows, watched the tree line. John didn't stop her. He just oiled his rifle and sat by the fire. Liam spoke softly from his cot. She gonna stay? John looked at the boy. If she wants to, she should. Liam yawned. She smells like cinnamon. John blinked. What? The boy shrugged. Not bad, just like a memory. By morning, John rode into Rustwater Creek. He left Liam with instructions and told Mira not to answer the door for anyone she didn't recognize. He didn't wear his clean coat. He wore the one with the stitched-in pocket, the one that carried iron. The town was quiet when he arrived. Too quiet. He bought supplies from the general store, then leaned on the counter and asked, real casual, anyone die last week? Woman, maybe 25? The clerk scratched his beard. You mean that Briggs' bride? Mira Calloway or something? John kept his face still. That her name? Yup. Married Simon Briggs. Then she up and died. Or so they said. Never saw a preacher. No public notice. Just vanished. John's pulse ticked. Where's the Briggs place now? West of Dry Creek. Harlan runs it all now that Simon's gone. Fire took the old house. Strange week, that one. John didn't say another word, just turned and walked out into the cold. Something dark pressed at the edges of his mind. Someone had tried to bury Mira in more than just dirt. They tried to erase her entirely, but they hadn't counted on her surviving, and they damn sure hadn't counted on her ending up with a man who'd buried enough dead to know when one wasn't ready. Back at Ironwood Ranch, Mira stood on the porch in John's old coat, staring out at the snow. When he rode up, she didn't flinch, just watched him, steady-eyed. You married Simon? He asked. She nodded. You loved him? No answer. Then softly, I was sold. The words landed like bullets. John dismounted. And Harlan? He called me the key. He thought if I died quiet, the land would be his. But you didn't die. She looked at him. Not all the way. John stared out toward the horizon. If he comes looking, we'll be ready. Mira didn't speak. She just placed her hand on the doorframe and etched that same crooked brand into the wood. Then she crossed it out, one clean final line. The first sign came with the snow. Not the storm, that had passed. But what followed? A trail of boot prints outside the barn that neither John nor Liam had left. One set, deep, heavy, circling. John stood staring at them at sunrise, rifle resting against his hip. No animals had been taken, no doors forced, but someone had been close, too close. He didn't mention it to Mira. Yet, that afternoon, Mira braided her hair for the first time since arriving. She sat by the hearth, legs folded beneath her, hands working quietly. Liam watched her from the corner, chewing on a strip of dried apple. You're stronger now, the boy said. She glanced up. Not strong enough. He frowned. You will be. When John returned from checking the fence lines, Mira was wearing one of his spare coats, patched, too big but warm, and stirring the stew pot like it was just another winter day. But the air between them said otherwise. John stepped inside, set his gloves near the stove, and finally spoke. Somebody's been watching us. Mira didn't flinch. I know. You see them? No, she said. But I feel it. Same way I used to feel when he was near. John didn't ask who she meant. He already knew. Harland Briggs. That night the wind turned cruel, sharp enough to peel bark, cold enough to freeze breath midair. John made his rounds through the outbuildings, nailing down loose slats, shoring up the feed shed, lashing the corral gates. When he came back in, Mira was sitting by the fire in every quilt they owned. Her hands were red from washing dishes, but her eyes were clear. They'll come soon, she said. John peeled off his coat, sat across from her, and nodded. Yeah. Mira stared into the flames. Why help me? He didn't answer right away. Then, because the first shovel I dug for you wasn't really yours. She looked over, confused. It was mine, John said. I just didn't know it yet. They both woke to the smell. Smoke. Thick, bitter, unmistakable. John was off the cot and moving before full awareness hit him. He grabbed the shotgun by the door, flung it open. The barn was burning. Flames crawled along the roof, hungry and fast. Wood cracked, splinters snapped, sparks danced on the snow, and heat pushed against him like a solid wall. Liam, he shouted. The boy came running from the back room, barefoot and terrified. Mira, John called. I'm here. Her voice came from the loft ladder. She'd been gathering blankets from the haystack. Her eyes were wild with smoke. John rushed toward her, coat flapping. The fire popped loud above them, timbers groaning. He reached the ladder as she descended, coughing, one arm shielding her face. He caught her halfway down, lifting her by the waist, dragging her out into the cold. Liam had a bucket of water, already throwing it onto the porch rail, but it hissed uselessly. There was no saving the barn. They watched it collapse inward, flames swallowing what little feed was left, the spare tools, the wagon, everything. Mira leaned against John's side, her breath visible in short, ragged bursts. They're warning us, she said. John looked down at her. Her face was streaked with soot, her hair damp from melted snow. Then we better answer. Sheriff Griggs arrived just after sunrise. He rode up slow, like a man out for a morning trot. No rush, no concern. His coat buttoned neat, star gleaming like it meant something. John stood at the edge of the blackened ruins, arms crossed, jaw locked. The sheriff dismounted and kicked at a smoking beam with the toe of his boot. Tragic, he said flatly. Barns go up quick. Dry wood, pitch knots, maybe a lantern tipped. No lantern, John cut in, and we don't store pitch. Griggs looked up slowly. You accusing someone, Mercer? Not yet. The sheriff's eyes flicked toward the cabin, where Mira stood with Liam in the doorway. A scarf was pulled up over her jaw, but her eyes were visible, cold and quiet. That your niece? The sheriff asked, voice casual. No. Kin? No. Then what is she? John stepped closer. A guest, under my roof, my protection. Griggs let the silence sit a second. Well, let me know if you need help digging another grave. John's face didn't change. Just one. The sheriff's eyes darkened, but he didn't respond. He tipped his hat and rode off. After he was gone, Mira stepped into the ash. The hem of her coat turned black, smoke still rising around her. That's twice now, she whispered. John came to her side. They want you scared, he said. I'm not scared. He turned to face her. Then what are you? She hesitated. Angry. Good. She looked up at him. I'm not meant to live. You know that, right? John didn't blink. That's a lie someone told you to make themselves feel clean. She held his gaze. I saw the man who gave the order. It wasn't Simon. John didn't ask. He waited. Harlan, she said finally. He said I was the key, that he'd make it look like sleep. No pain, no blood, just quiet. Then the land would be his. John's fist clenched. He doesn't get to win, he said. Mira's voice was steady now. Then help me stop him. John nodded. I'll help you bury him, if it comes to that. She looked away, but her voice didn't tremble. I don't want more graves. John turned toward the trees. Then you better learn to stand tall, because the next time they come, it won't be fire. She didn't answer right away. Then slowly she nodded. That night she moved into the main house. Not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as someone staking a claim. And for the first time, John slept with the door unlocked. Not because he felt safe, but because he wasn't alone anymore. Rustwater Creek hadn't seen a woman ride into town alone in years. Not one who carried herself like the law owed her something. Mira Calloway sat tall in the saddle, wrapped in John's old trail coat, her jaw set against the cold wind. She didn't look left or right, didn't flinch at the whispers. John rode beside her, boots heavy in the stirrups, rifle strapped across his back like punctuation to every silent promise they carried. They didn't come for vengeance. Not yet. They came for paper. The notary's office stood quiet beside the telegraph post, its windows fogged from the heat inside. John opened the door and held it for her like it mattered. Not as a gesture, but as an acknowledgement. This is your right. Now take it. Mr. Rowan, the town notary, blinked when he saw them. Can I help? Mira stepped forward and placed the folded deed on the counter. The man hesitated. John's voice followed. You're going to file that. Today. The notary glanced between them. Miss Calloway, I was informed you were dead, she said. I was. Briefly. Mr. Rowan cleared his throat and unfolded the document. Where did you? Simon Briggs deeded me the land 2 weeks before he died. It's signed, witnessed, sealed, and Harlan Briggs has no legal claim unless this disappears. John leaned forward. And it won't disappear. Not this time. The notary, hands trembling, reached for his stamp. The thump echoed like a gunshot. Date, time, signature, legal, unmistakable. Mira exhaled, and for the first time her name wasn't a whisper or a memory. It was law. Outside the wind had dropped, but the tension hadn't. Sheriff Griggs stood by the saloon steps, boots caked in old mud, chewing a toothpick with theatrical calm. Well, he muttered, pushing off from the post as they passed. Ain't you a resurrection story? Mira didn't stop. Sheriff. He fell in step beside John. You think that paper will protect her? He asked. I think it'll make damn sure folks know who to blame if she vanishes again. Griggs spit. I always liked Simon. Quiet, kept his land tidy, never asked questions. That might be what killed him, John said. The sheriff shrugged. All I know is Harlan's got more friends than you, and money talks louder than truth out here. Mira turned. Her eyes didn't flash. They hardened. Then I hope the law's ears are still open. Griggs held her gaze for a long second, then tipped his hat. We'll see. They didn't linger in town. Too many eyes. Too many loaded silences. But just before they left, Mira stepped into the telegraph office and handed the clerk a letter. Send this to Judge Clemens in Fort Wilder, she said, and make sure it's signed Mira Calloway, alive and unwilling to be buried. The clerk blinked but nodded. John watched her from outside. When she emerged, he handed her the reins and said, We ride fast. We ride quiet. Mira nodded. We ride together. Back at Ironwood Ranch, Liam waited on the porch like a sentry. He held a loaded shotgun across his knees. Too large for him, too heavy, but he sat with the gravity of a grown man. You did it? He asked. John nodded. Filed and sealed. Liam exhaled. Then they'll come tonight. Neither adult corrected him. They all knew. That evening passed with preparation. Rifles were checked, doors barred, buckets of water hauled from the well and lined up near the porch. Mira double-knotted her boots and laid a pistol beside her cot. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need it. John hammered a board across the rear windows and made sure every hinge was silent. He glanced at her only once. You scared? She stared out the window. Yes. Good. Means you're thinking straight. She turned. You. I'm past scared. Mira moved to his side. Then what? Ready. By midnight, the wind was gone. Still, too still. Liam had fallen asleep by the hearth, shotgun across his lap. Mira sat by the front window, eyes tracking every shadow that moved. John paced like a wolf trapped in a burning barn. Then, footsteps. 3 sets. Snow crunched. Shapes moved behind the tree line. John opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The cold hit like a slap, but he didn't blink. Harlan Briggs sat atop a dark bay horse, flanked by 2 hired men with dull eyes and fast hands. He didn't speak at first, just smiled. "Well," he called out, "seems rumors of your survival were not exaggerated." Mira stepped beside John. "You came to finish the job?" Harlan tilted his head. "I came to claim what's mine. It's not yours. That land was always meant for me." "No," she said. "It was meant for whoever stayed alive long enough to keep it." Harlan's smile faded. "I buried you once," he said coldly. John stepped forward, rifle down but loaded. "And if you try again, I'll put you there myself." Harlan sneered. "You think your deed matters? I think my aim does." Silence, just the creak of saddles, the flicker of firelight inside. Then Harlan turned his horse with a snap. "This isn't done." John didn't lower the rifle. "Number, but next time, it won't be a conversation." When the riders disappeared into the trees, Mira's shoulders sank. She didn't speak. Just watched the dark. John turned to her. "We made it through tonight." "Barely. We'll make it through tomorrow, too." Mira looked at him, voice thin but steady. "I'm not the girl you carried out of that grave." John nodded. "I know. You still going to fight for me?" He stepped closer. "I'm not fighting for you." He paused. "I'm fighting with you." She breathed deep, and for the first time since that night in the snow, Mira Calloway smiled. Not out of relief, out of resolve. The first shot came just after dawn. It cracked through the brittle silence like the sky itself had been torn open. John Mercer had already been awake, crouched on the porch sharpening his knife when the bullet slammed into the corner post 6 inches from his face. Splinters flew past his cheek. He didn't flinch. Rolled sideways, grabbed the rifle beside him, and chambered around before the second shot echoed across the hollow. Inside, Liam scrambled to his feet, shouting from the loft. "They're here!" Mira's boots hit the floorboards a beat later. She didn't scream, didn't freeze. She was already pulling on her coat, pistol in hand, jaw tight. John barked, "North side! 2 riders! Fast!" He saw them flash between trees like wolves, rifles raised. He took aim, fired. One rider dropped before he even hit the ground. The second veered hard and disappeared behind the ridge. Then a pause. Not quiet, but waiting. The kind of silence that had weight. "They're circling," John muttered. Mira moved through the room like she belonged there. No longer a guest or ghost. She grabbed a bandolier from the hook by the stove, slung it over her shoulder, and crouched behind the water barrel. 3 clean shots from her pistol echoed sharp and sure. Outside, a man screamed. John peeked through the front window and saw him crawling behind a pile of brush, shoulder bleeding, rifle dropped. "2 more on foot," John called out, "coming through the barn wreckage." Liam was already by the back door, smaller shotgun braced against the doorframe. His hands shook, but his aim held. "They're trying to split us," he shouted. John gritted his teeth. "Then we hold." He crouched by the hearth and opened the cabinet beneath it, pulled out a second rifle, old but clean. He handed it to Mira. "Ever fire one of these?" She didn't answer, just checked the chamber and nodded. John almost smiled. The next rush came faster. 2 figures charged across the yard, guns blazing, yelling curses. Snow flew behind their boots. Mira stood at the window, exhaled slowly, and fired twice. 1 bullet grazed a man's thigh. The second hit true, square in the chest. The man fell face down in the snow and didn't move again. John stepped out onto the porch, drew fire, and answered with precision. Another man screamed and went down. Then the woods went still again. Only 1 rider remained, Harlan Briggs. He sat atop his bay mare just past the tree line, watching the cabin like a man studying a puzzle. His coat was immaculate, gloves stitched with gold thread, and he hadn't fired a shot. He didn't need to. He was there to finish the story. John stepped out into the open, rifle across his chest. blood on his sleeve where a splinter had torn skin, but his voice was steady. "No more," he called out. Harlan didn't move. "You think this is the end?" "I think you lost." Harlan's mouth twisted. "That land won't save her. That paper won't stop men like me." Behind John, Mira stepped forward. "No," she said clearly, "but truth might." She raised a letter. Judge Clemens's seal visible under the wax. "This was mailed 2 days ago. He's read the deed. He knows I'm alive. Marshals will come." Harlan's face darkened. "You think they'll believe a woman who's already been buried?" John took a step forward. "They'll believe the man who dug the grave and found her breathing, and the bullet holes in my wall, and the dead men you brought." From behind the cabin, Liam appeared, holding the shotgun like it weighed nothing. He stood tall. Too tall for 10. "Go home," he shouted, "before I put one between your eyes." Even John blinked. Harlan's horse shifted beneath him. He looked around. 3 men down, another missing. Only him left. The law was coming. And worse than that, witnesses were watching. He didn't speak again, just sneered, turned his horse, and rode away through the trees. Not like a man retreating, but like a man measuring the distance for his next strike. The snow fell harder as the silence returned. Mira sank to the porch steps, breathing fast. John joined her, hand pressed to his bleeding arm. Liam sat between them, shotgun laid across his knees. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mira looked at John. "Is it over?" John wiped blood from his temple. "No," he said, "but we survived the first charge." She nodded. "That's something. It's everything." Later, as the fire cracked and the bodies were wrapped in blankets out back, Mira placed a pot of coffee on the stove and stood with her hands around a chipped mug. She didn't shake, didn't flinch. She just stared out the window like she was seeing the land for the first time. John sat at the table, hand wrapped in a cloth, his shoulders heavy. "You held your ground," he said. She turned slightly. "So did you." "I've buried a lot of folks, Mira, but this morning, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was digging my own grave." She blinked slowly, then stepped toward him, placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're not done," she whispered. "I know, but we're not alone anymore." John looked up at her. "Number, we're not." And in that moment, with the snow falling thick and the scent of gunpowder still clinging to the air, something shifted between them. Not romance, not yet, but alliance. 2 people no longer running, but standing, together. The grave was still there, untouched, waiting. John Mercer stood beside it at dusk, shovel in hand, the earth frozen solid around his boots. He hadn't filled it the day she was brought to him, wrapped in linen and silence. He hadn't had the heart, or maybe something deeper told him it wasn't time. Now he stared at it with a different weight in his chest. This grave was meant for Mira, but maybe all along it had really been meant for him. The man who buried everything, love, memory, himself, with every handful of dirt. Behind him, footsteps crunched in the snow. He didn't turn. "I thought you might be here," Mira said softly. John nodded. It didn't feel right leaving it open. Mira stepped beside him. Her coat flapped gently in the breeze, the hem still scorched from the barn fire. Her face was pale but calm. "Are you going to fill it?" John looked down into the hollow. "Not for a body." He set the shovel blade into the earth, not to bury death, but to bury the end of something else. Grief, guilt. The man who had nothing but ghosts to talk to. He pressed dirt into the hole, careful, slow, purposeful. Mira didn't stop him. She just stood there with him while the light faded. 2 days later, the marshals arrived from Fort Wilder. Judge Clemens had read her letter, had read the deed, had read the sheriff's name beside Harlan Briggs's in enough whispers to know something stank in Rustwater Creek. Harlan was arrested without ceremony. Sheriff Griggs resigned before they could take his badge. The remaining Briggs men scattered like roaches when the law entered town. No trial was needed. The land was Mira's. Fully, legally, publicly. The springs beneath Ironwood Ranch still ran clean and deep, enough for cattle, crops, and hope. And for once, Mira didn't whisper her name. She signed it with ink. Bold, straight, Mira Calloway. That spring she rebuilt the barn. John helped, though he swore more than he hammered. Liam drew a picture of it when it was finished, crooked and bright, with a chicken 3 times the size of a horse. Mira pinned it above the hearth anyway. One morning she found John standing in the doorway with a coffee cup in hand. He looked at her for a long time before saying, "You're not just alive, Mira. You're rooted," she smiled. "So are you. You just didn't know it," he chuckled. "I always thought I'd die in this place. Quiet. Alone." "You still might," she said, "but not yet." They didn't talk about what they were, not in words, but John began sleeping in the room next to hers. Left the door cracked. Lit the stove before she woke. Mira took to cooking in the mornings. Her biscuits were dry, her coffee too strong. John never said a word, and Liam, when asked by a schoolmate if they were a family, said, "Well, we're still standing, and that counts." One afternoon, Mira returned from town with a folded piece of paper. She laid it on the table in front of John. It was another deed, smaller, 1 acre of land beside the creek, in John's name. "I don't want your land," he said softly. She shook her head. "It's not payment, it's presence." He looked up. She added, "I want to make sure you always have something that's yours, even if it's just dirt." John stared at her, then nodded. "You already gave me more than that." Mira tilted her head. "What?" "A reason to stop digging." Weeks passed. Grass returned. Chickens nested. Liam built a scarecrow with a tin star on its chest and named it Griggs. The land quieted, not empty, but peaceful. One night, as the sun dipped low behind the ridge, Mira and John sat on the porch, boots propped on the railing. She broke the silence. "Do you ever think about that first day? All the time. What if you hadn't noticed me breathing?" John looked at her. "You'd have dug your way back out." She smiled, then reached across the space between them, took his weathered hand in hers. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was trust. It was belonging, and that was harder to come by than love most days. The grave John once dug never held a body, but it held a turning. It marked where silence ended, where a man remembered how to stand for something, where a woman remembered how to fight for herself, where a boy saw what courage really looked like, not in bullets or shouting, but in choosing to live when everything says not to. Ironwood Ranch still creaked in the wind, still needed fences mended and roofs patched, but now it held more than bones and sorrow. It held hope, and sometimes that's all a place needs. Some graves are meant for bodies. Others are meant for the parts of us we finally lay to rest. If this story touched you, if you found a piece of yourself in John, in Mira, or in the silence between their words, we'd love to hear it. Let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Whether you're somewhere cold like Rustwater Creek or warm as a prairie spring, your voice matters here. And if you believe second chances can come wrapped in frost, fire, or a name scrawled in chalk, hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the grave isn't the end. Sometimes it's where the truth finally begins.